Welcome to Dabo Recap. Enjoy your viewing. Night. The bright moon illuminates the entrance to the building, opposite a barrel on which several pitch-black crows sit. An abandoned building is strewn inside with various garbage, and the main character is surrounded by 4 unknown people. Unknown people report that someone has offered a huge reward for his head. The main character places the cold corpse of a girl on the ground, who is actually his sister. He threatens them with violence, throwing a piercing, ferocious look at them like that of a hungry tiger. There is loud laughter, and a man with white hair, wearing a cloak and his arms are covered with strange tattoos. He reproaches the main character for unnecessary chatter. In the next second, a strike as swift as lightning, aimed at the face of the ill-wisher, reaches its target. Those remaining opened their mouths in surprise and watched as the speaker's body flew into the wall behind. The main character glances at the remaining mercenaries on their feet. In a moment, 3 people will attack him at once using their strongest abilities while he stands still and does not move. The main character uses the release of his true QE, a blindingly bright force throwing everyone in different directions. Under the pressure of incredible force, the building shatters into small concrete pieces, as if an explosion of enormous proportions had occurred inside. All the killers scattered in different directions and breathed their last breath. Their clothes were torn and their bodies suffered enormous damage. An unexpected shock, the main character realizes that he has abused the use of his power, and now everything will turn against him. Experiencing pain piercing throughout his body, he does not know what to do. Taking one last look at his sister's body, his eyes close and his soul leaves the body. The galaxy, the stars, the endless universe, an array that flies through its expanses at incredible speed. It circles around many planets and heads towards a bright blue star, descending through different layers of the atmosphere, piercing the clouds, getting closer and closer to the ground. He rushes through the mountains to the country of Bayue, located among them. Suddenly, a voice was heard begging them to wake up and say at least a few words. Opening his eyes, he found that he was in a room unknown to himself. In this life, his name would be Wu Shuang. The girl sitting opposite immediately hugs Wu Shuang and says how much she was worried that he wouldn't wake up again. He in turn doesn't understand anything, looks at the girl with surprised eyes. The main one in bewilderment examines her, the surroundings, his hands, and is surprised that they are small, like a child's. Looking out the open window located next to the bed, he sees houses, mountains, a landscape completely unknown to him. Suddenly he remembers his sister, her body lying on the cold ground. With questions about where she is, he pushes away the girl opposite. The same one says that she is his sister and with a surprised look asks what's wrong with him and why he doesn't recognize her. Looking at her surprised face, he mentally evaluates her age and appearance, realizing that she is very similar to his deceased sister. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he, not paying attention to his new sister, begins to wonder why he is still alive. Noticing the mirror, he very quickly runs up to it. In the reflection, he sees a small beaten child. Suddenly, a lightning-fast pain pierces him, clutching his head. Wu Shuang does not understand what is happening. Unknown memories, a home, an impoverished family, a father and sister came flooding back to him. He remembers the Wutong Academy, where he studies, and where the children of the nobility constantly humiliate him. In the last flashback, he accepts a challenge from his peer, Xian Zhang. During a fight that would more appropriately be called a one-sided beating, he is beaten to death. Having come to his senses, he hears his sister wondering what's wrong with him, but the main character pretends that everything is fine, transferring his vision to the sore wound. Realizing that this is his new life, that now he has a family, he asks his sister where their father went, but his sister does not want to tell him the truth. Questioning her sister more and more, she invites him not to think about it, but rather to take better care of himself, because the future of the family lies with him. Wu Shuang continues to ask his sister for an honest answer to his question, but he cannot get a concrete answer. In his heart, he already understood where his father was going, so after telling his sister that he needs to be stopped, he sends her to catch up and stop his father from a rash act. The street is filled with people with shocked faces. Everyone makes way to see an evil man with a spear in his hand who emits a red aura, his eyes filled with a thirst for revenge. He goes straight to the goal, not paying attention to the environment around him, when suddenly his daughter catches up with him, who is calling him from across the street. Surprised, he asks why she is not at home, but she, in turn with tears in her eyes, reports that her brother is alive, that he has finally woken up. Hearing these words, the man immediately begins to run through the crowded street in the direction of the house, because his son is alive. At this time, Wu Shuang looked at himself in the mirror and already accepted the fact that he had been reborn, and a completely new life awaited him. A moment later, his father crosses the threshold into the room, his face full of surprise and joy at the same time. The main character considers his father, Qinglian Shan, a tall man with a beard and long red hair. The big hand that fell on his head brought him completely new sensations of fatherly love, which he had never experienced in his previous life. The father, wondering who dared to beat him so badly, says that to restore justice, the only thing that needs to be done is to confirm the identity of the offender. After some thought, he invites his father to forget everything and leave it in the past, because the main thing is to look forward. He gives Wu Shuang a surprised look, wondering what happened to his son. Why is a child who was always alone and could not sit in one place so calm in such a situation? With an absolutely calm look, the main character begins to tell his father that it's still impossible to forget hatred. But if you rely only on a feeling of revenge, you won't be able to pull your family out of poverty. Having completely agreed with his son, Lian Shan invites him to quit the academy, and from the next day promises to teach him the ancient martial art. Relying on the glory, power, and wealth of his ancestors, he is confident that hereditary martial techniques will not help him reach the pinnacle of true martial arts. By this time, his sister had returned home, and immediately began to support that the academy was not the best place for him. But Wu Shuang suggests that they should not rush into a decision. After reflection, the main character assures his father and sister that he will no longer allow anyone to mock the once great Qing family. He understands that his words may scare them because the past Wu Shuang would never have said such words. A moment later he yawns, saying that he is tired, and his father sends him to rest, saying that they will discuss the rest as soon as he gets better. Fast forward to the night. The main character lies on an unremarkable bed and cannot leave his thoughts. Why does the Zhang family feel anger towards Qing? Why is there such devastation in his family? From the memory of the owner of the body, he comes to the conclusion that one of the reasons is the family assessment carried out every 4 years. Without an heir, the Qing family will be cut off, which will lead to the loss of a place in the family assessment, and therefore there will be no place among the nobility. Once they lost this place, everything that belonged to the Qing would be divided among the remaining families. Along with the economy, the social status of the family will also increase, which will be even worse, because in the world there is an impenetrable gulf between the nobility and the common people. The main character is sure that the whole fight was specially staged, that it was all part of some kind of conspiracy. The next day, the news that Wu Shuang had risen spread throughout the city, knowing everyone, even the nobles and elders. A month later, on the training ground, the main character has fully recovered from his injuries. While training, he remembers his past life, how strong he was, his nickname, and also expresses the shortcoming of Wu Shuang's past. He had never practiced powerful techniques. In his past life, on the contrary, he learned only the best first-class techniques. Each book was a legendary masterpiece. Taking a confident stance, he firmly decided that in this life he would correct all the regrets of the past. Light footsteps were heard from behind. It was the sister heading towards Wu Shuang with a worried look. She brought the news that Mr. Jin Bui and the academy had come, and together with Dad was waiting for him in the pavilion. Inquiring why he came, she assumed that he wanted to offer condolences after the incident at the academy. Lost in thought, he remembers how Jin Buki silently watched Qing Wu Shuang's fight with Xian Zhang. Watching everything from the balcony, a disgusting smile stood out on his face, which meant that he took the side of the Zhang family. When the father and sister came in a hurry to the academy, people stood in front of them, smiling sarcastically. In their hands, they held a stretcher on which Wu Shuang's body was located. Returning to reality, he resolutely headed straight to meet the welcome guests. Approaching the pavilion, he made a promise to himself that from that very moment, he would begin to restore his family. There were 3 figures in the TV pavilion at that moment. As soon as he crossed the threshold, Jin Bui immediately inquired about the wounds of the protagonist. When our hero arrived at the pavilion, there were a total of 4 people inside. Wu Shuang's father was sitting on a chair opposite the entrance. Another person was sitting next to him. The remaining 2 surrounded him on either side. One of those standing was the dean already known to us. I propose to meet 2 new characters. The first will be a fat man with a goatee and a sparkling bald head. He is a lobbyist, and his name is Gu Shen. The second character looks younger. He has the sophisticated look of a rich aristocrat, and his clothes are clearly not cheap. We are told that he is an influential person, and his name is Xu Sihai. Wu Shuang directed his judgmental gaze at Dean Jin Bui. He mentally expresses his opinion and that he has no right to be called a good person. He remembers how Qing Wu Shuang was beaten, and this arrogant degenerate simply ignored what was happening, watching from the sidelines. The main character is interested in why he came here, and in addition he pretends to be a good man. With full confidence, spreading his arms, our hero begins to thank the dean, saying that the wounds have already recovered and he has nothing to worry about. Not understanding what happened to the boy, Jin Bui, with a grin on his face, is completely sure that even if he is at home, he will not be able to stand up to him. Here our hero's father enters into the conversation, noting that such people would not have come without a reason, so he wonders why they came after all. Gu Shen steps forward and with an unpleasant smile says that he has come to give the head of Qing some valuable advice. He begins the conversation by mentioning the quadrennial family assessment, also touching on the plight of their family. Frowning, Chief Xing asks what the guest is getting at. An increasingly mocking look appears on his face, and he says that the head must realize what will happen to his family if they lose their place. But he is sure that he does not know what will happen after. With his hands spread, he confidently declares that he knows a way out of this situation, but is not sure whether the head of Qing wants to hear it. At this moment, Wu Shuang enters the conversation and says that he wants to hear the fat man's idea, and if she can really help the family, then they will generously thank him. Pointing his hand at the sitting gentleman, he introduces him. Shu Sihai is the younger brother of the head of the wealthy Shu family, and he came to our hero's family as a representative from Shu, and he has one promise. What is the essence of the promise? It's simple. If the Qing family gives up a place among the nobility after 4 years, then his family can guarantee your safety. Such a statement angered the head of Qing, and he clarified whether Gu Shen was confident in his words, and that his family would definitely be defeated in 4 years. Gu Shen, disrespectfully calling the head of the family brother, begins to put pressure on him, mentioning the poverty of his family. Also mentions that over the past 20 years, many ruling forces have changed in Luojiang province, and finally, completely belittling the reputation of the Qin family. He compares it with the owner of a herbal store, that he even has more connections. Containing his anger, the head of Qing says that the sacred land of Zhenwu is in charge of everything, and the people responsible for everything are appointed by the deputy emperor. Gu Shen objects to Lian Shan's words, saying that the emperor does not have time to bother with such a small province. Besides, the world is the survival of the fittest, and no one cares about the methods you will use. The head of Qing could not contain his anger, and shouted to clarify whether he understood correctly that they had come only to block the road for his family. The fat man confidently says that Qing will leave his place no matter what happens, and at the end he adds that it is not yet known whether his family can hold out for another 4 years. The head of the Qing mentions that although their bloodline has experienced decline, it has not fallen so low that others do with it whatever they want. In his words, he is ready to survive both robbery and insult. Shu Sihai looked at Lian Shan with displeasure and asked whether his words meant that he would prefer to die with honor instead of choosing a despicable life. The angry head said that the ancestors established the rule that any pest must be destroyed without exception. Rising from his chair and waving his hand, he told his daughter to escort the guests. Angered by this attitude, Gu Shen began to assure that since Lian Shan did not mean well, as soon as his family was thrown into the street, he would be the first to throw a stone at him. Wu Shuang intervenes again in the conversation and immediately compares Gu Shen to a dog that barks at people. He in turn says that there is no difference between the son and the father, and both of them will soon regret it. Shu Sihai, getting up from his seat, says that there is no longer anything to be here, since the head of Qing will not back down from his position. While he was leaving, Jin Bui also decided to say a few final words. He, referring to the healed wounds of our hero, insists on his return to the academy, because there are no noble children who would not want to study at the Wutong Academy. Wu Shuang, fully agreeing with the words of the dean, confidently promises to return to the academy. Jin Bui reminded him that no matter what happens, he must be focused on his studies. Making a sarcastic joke, our hero says to the back of the departing guests that he will not see them off. As soon as the unwanted guests left, the father decided to clarify whether his son really wanted to return to the academy. He immediately received a positive answer. The main character, saying that the trio was not just determined to return to the academy because it is a matter of honor, and remembering the fight, he is sure that it was all a conspiracy, and not against him specifically, but against the whole family. Realizing that he will not be able to convince his son, he says that hundreds of years ago the Qing were one of the richest families, and in the entire province of Luojiang, only a couple of people dared to raise their voices in their presence. Wu Shuang, in response to a short story about the past, decides to express his thoughts. He knows that the survival of the Qing family depends only on him and his father, and he is determined to lead his family to unprecedented heights. Lian Shan decides to support his son, and also warns him that once he gets back to the academy, he will have to endure all the difficulties without letting himself be led into a trap. Wu Shuang assures his father that he now understands what to do and what not to do. After a conversation with his father, our hero was in no hurry to return to the academy. Instead, he decided to devote a month to his training, and here we see him sitting on a large stump in the lotus position, and bright energy gathers between his hands. Lost in his thoughts, he begins to ponder which technique he should cultivate first, and based on the experience of his past life, he decides to choose the King Kong Fist as his main attack technique. Next comes our hero's discussion of the stages of strength. In the past world, there were no boundaries of qualification for internal and external cultivation, but in this only external strength is trained in order to reach those boundaries of heights that the body allows. From external to internal, one can create strength within and enter the stage of cultivating internal strength. The outer stages of this world are called the power strength stage, and after completing it completely, you can enter the stages called true might. Each stage is divided into 9 levels. By the way, our hero in a past life went through both stages of cultivation, and by the standards of this world, his strength was equal to the peak of the true power of the 9th level, and perhaps even slightly exceeded it. After a month of active training, Wu Shuang was able to reach the 7th level of power strength. He is confident that if he continues at the same pace, he will be able to break through all levels of power strength and enter the stage of true strength, with his plans to regain at least 80% of his previous strength before the family evaluation begins. Deciding to test his strength, he hits the tree using all of it at once, and this blow easily penetrates the thick trunk. Returning home, he notices his sister, who sitting at a table in the yard looks rather upset. Coming closer to her, he asks in surprise what happened and why she looks so sad. Getting up, the girl, trying to avoid answering, asks what her brother practiced today, but our hero will not accept this, because he has already realized that something is bothering his sister. Looking into her eyes, he says that she will tell him everything without hiding anything if she considers him a brother. Little manipulator. She begins to tell her that yesterday, some bean came to see her from the farmland estate and let her know that they had a long conversation. But this morning, his body was found at the front door. Surprised, Wu Shuang wonders how this could even happen. With a frightened face, she says that this is all a demon tormenting her for 6 years now. Tears began to appear in her eyes. Surprised, Wu Shuang decides to ask again if it's really a demon and what it even means. It turns out that all this started when his sister was 12. The demon said that he liked her, and in exactly 10 years he would take her. He also scared his father that he would not allow her to marry, and Wu Shuang was not told anything due to his hot temper. For 6 years, absolutely all the guys who communicated with her either died or disappeared. His sister became a real Death Star. Understanding that strange demon will come for his sister in 4 years, he has even more reasons to become stronger, telling his sister not to worry and to live for the next 4 years because he can protect her. Remembering the tragedy of his past life, how his sister died, he is simply obliged to protect her in this one. Here our hero finally stands confidently in front of the entrance to Wutong Academy. Smiling and looking towards the huge entrance arch, he confidently takes a step inside. Entering the academy's courtyard, a whole non-stop crowd immediately gathered around him. Everyone recognized him, and everyone was also surprised that, according to them, having returned to his insignificant life, he decided to return to the academy instead of hiding at home. Who even assumed that since he was not dead, he became even dumber after that beating. Xianzhang and Shu Ting were also present in the crowd. The former expressed his opinion that since Wu Shuang dared to return, then he did not take them seriously. Our hero, not paying attention to the words of the crowd, simply glances at everyone, perceiving them as nothing more than a bunch of brats. But then the dean of the academy stands in the way, supposedly glad of his return. Looking at him dissatisfied, the main character is sure that Jin Buyi has many plans to ruin his life at the academy. The dean approaches and asks whether his head injury has healed, but Wu Shuang sharply replies that the dean should remove the interfering objects from his mouth if he wants to say something. Having missed such a harsh response, Jin Buyi says that after that unpleasant incident there were minor negative consequences, and he hopes that in the future our hero will be more restrained. Smiling contemptuously, he asks whether he thinks he is wrong, saying that the dean is right. Wu Shuang begins a monologue that if he is bullied, he must endure it, and if they want to rob the lands, he will be obliged to give up all resources, production, and trade. Raising a dissatisfied look at him, he asked whether he understood everything correctly from the words of the respected dean. Looking at the main character in surprise, Jin Buyi wondered when that kid managed to become so sharp-tongued. He warned Wu Shuang not to cause problems, otherwise he would be brought before the law. At this moment, our hero objected and said that it was the dean who invited him to return to the academy, and also asked how he could deal with him. The nasty old man answered this question. That will expel him and drive him away. Turning around, Wu Shuang, saying that he would remember the dean's words, simply left. Next we see him in front of the door to his room. Opening the door, he didn't see anything special there. It was a simple, unremarkable room. While he was looking around behind him, someone called him, asking why he had returned. It was Wu Shuang's neighbor, Hu Pinyin. His comrade asked why our hero returned to the Wutong Academy, and whether he knew that Xianzhang was targeting him, to which he replied that he knew everything. Continuing to say that he shouldn't have returned, he didn't stop talking, but our hero interrupted him, saying that if he came to warn him about this, wouldn't he also become their target? Pinyin, citing the fact that they grew up together in the same city. He does not want to see how he will be humiliated. Thinking that he didn't want to involve anyone, Wu Shuang asked Pinyin not to come to him unless it was something important, because he could handle the rest himself. Not understanding what happened to his friend, the boy left the room. Already at night, our hero decided to start cultivating while sitting on the roof of a building opposite his room. He was attracted by two silhouettes that were rustling something near his room. Having gone down to eavesdrop on their conversation from a closer distance, he heard the two strangers about to throw in what they received from Mr. Shu before he returned to the room. As soon as the unknown people left Wu Shuang's room, he immediately decides to go check what they left there. Entering the room, his attention was drawn to a ribbon sticking out between the closet door. Opening it, he found what the recent pests had left behind, and mentioned that since Shu Ting likes to play dirty, he will not be left out. In the midst of a clear night illuminated by the bright light of the full moon, the street suddenly became quite noisy. On the territory of the women's dormitory, the girls began to make a fuss because someone had stolen the underwear of most of the residents there. A bunch of boys gathered together and began to look for the thief, following in his footsteps towards the women's bedrooms. Discussing this, absolutely all the boys were unhappy, saying that it was disgusting and humiliating. Shu Ting asked the guy who was making the most noise if he had seen that thief, to which Li Fei, that's the guy's name, gave a positive answer. At this time, he was going to the toilet and allegedly noticed a silhouette jumping on the walls. The next question he wanted to know was whether he had seen him, but it was too dark outside. But the guy saw that the thief was running along the corridors of the bedrooms. Shu Ting, taking on the role of commander, warned everyone that since the men's dormitory was located on the side of the corridor, the thief was most likely located there. The young guys standing nearby confirmed that what he said made sense, and the thief was most likely among them. Then Comrade Zhang came up and suggested gathering all the guys in the area and checking the bedrooms one by one, so the thief wouldn't have time to run too far and he wouldn't be able to hide. Shu Ting agreed with him, calling this idea amazing. They unanimously decided to start with the bedrooms, where there are no people and the doors are still closed, since they are the most suspicious. Just as they were about to begin their investigation, they were interrupted by an angry female voice. A young girl jumped over the fence. She is the daughter of one of the three great families of Yun Qingyan. She said that she would personally go there and check everything. Shu Ting asked a slightly insensitive question, asking if she had been robbed like other girls, to which she told him not to approach her and start an investigation. Shu calmly agreed, asking her to go forward and lead the entire group. The angry beauty cannot believe that there was a daredevil who dared to steal her underwear. Walking along the corridor along the rooms and paying close attention to each one, she chose her first target. The embittered Qingyan kicked the door to the first bedroom with a strong kick. There was a drunk guy in the room who didn't understand what was happening. Zhang, who crawled out from behind the girl, said that Mrs. Yun was looking for a criminal, and if the guy was not guilty of anything, then he would have to calm down and not pay attention to them. Having made sure that there was nothing in the poor guy's room, she and a group of noble guys headed to the next room. Walking along the corridor, she broke down door after door but could not find anything in any of them. And when she tried to take out the next door, nothing came of it, which surprised her. Taking the stance of an arrogant girl, as if she imagined herself to be a queen, she asked who lived in this room. Zhang said that a child from the Qing family of the eastern city should live there. Qingyan was surprised to hear who lived there and did not understand how someone like him dared to lock the door. Having stepped in front, he loudly began to shout that he was from the Qing family, an asshole who didn't value the personal presence of Madame Yun. He continued to yell for him to open the door, but his attempts were unsuccessful. Just as Qingyan was about to open the door with brute force, it suddenly swung open, and our hero's face appeared in front of her foot. Pretending to be sleepy, as if he had just woken up, Wu Shuang asked what they needed from him at such a late hour. Outraged by his slowness, Qingyan asked why he didn't open. Yawning, he replied that he was sleeping and did not hear that they were banging on his door, and they also interrupted the dream in which he was going to marry a beauty. Zhang attacked Wu Shuang, saying that he was pretending to be an idiot. He indignantly said that there had been a robbery in the women's dormitory, and the culprit was one of the boys. Hinting at something, he said that if he had nothing to hide, he was obliged to let him in to search his room. With a serious face, the hero leaning on the door said that he had no idea about the robbery, and, in general, why on earth should he let them in? Zhang continued to yell that he was hiding something because he refused to let them into the room. Objecting, our hero says that let Madame Yun check their rooms first, and maybe they are hiding something. Checking his room is not a problem, but hinting at a setup, he suggests searching their rooms first. Qingyan is decisively ready to meet Wu Shuang, and is interested in which rooms he wants to check. It doesn't matter to him because their owners can simply refuse. Trying to get into the conversation, Shu Ting wanted to ask a question, but our hero interrupted him and suggested that he set an example and start from his room. Putting his hand on his heart, he says that he is completely ready for the fact that Mrs. Yun wants to check his room. The guys standing behind him began to assent, which is also not against. Citing others' attitudes towards this matter as an example, Qingyan tells Wu Shuang to get out of the way or not blame her for being rude later. Throwing a disapproving glance in their direction, he agrees to let her in, saying that he is not doing this out of respect. He's just interested in the end of this whole story. Qingyan slowly walked into the room, crossing her arms over her chest. Having walked a little further, she began to look around and, of course, she was attracted by the most suspicious place, in this case, a large closet. Approaching him, Wu Shuang began shouting that she should not open it, that she should not do this. The boys made a noise, shouting that our hero was hiding something there and it was worth opening it. Qingyan looked suspiciously at Wu Shuang and was determined to open the closet, thinking that the thief was about to be caught. But alas, not this time. As soon as the closet door was opened, a large variety of dirty socks fell from the top shelf onto the girl's head. The guys watching all this had their jaws dropped in surprise. Angry, Qingyan began to accuse Wu Shuang of doing this on purpose, because no one in their common sense would put socks in a pile. Grinning, our hero said that since his room had been checked, the rest could not be so easily ignored. An angry Yun Qingyan left the room, saying that he just silently followed her. Wu Shuang agreed and followed her. Walking further down the corridor, they came to the last room. Near the door hung a beautiful sign with the inscription Number 1. Seeing the room, Qingyan realized that she recognized it. It belongs to one of the nobility of the country, Luojiang. Having considered her decision, she tried to quickly walk past without paying attention to her. But Wu Shuang did not let her do this, pointing his finger at the sign and saying that she had not checked this room yet, so why did she miss it? Provoking her, he added that she only checks the rooms of those who are weaker than her. Turning to Shu and Zhang, he noticed that they had become quiet. Zhang indignantly said that our hero simply did not deserve such an honor. Laughing, Wu Shuang moved on, noticing that they were simply afraid to go inside. He further mentioned that the owner of the room, Mr. Dai Xiang, doesn't even live there. Approaching the next room, our hero was attracted by the smell of some kind of fragrance, and he suggested that this could be the room of one of the girls. But it was Chu Ting's room. He immediately said that he was innocent, and if Wu Shuang continued to slander him, he would sue him for slander towards the nobility. Our hero continued to provoke everyone. This time he said that they should check his room, and if he refuses, then he becomes a suspect. While mentioning Qingyan, Shu began to get angry, not understanding what the main character was trying to achieve with his nasty speeches. Looking at Qingyan, Wu Shuang mentioned that since both Shu and she were from wealthy families, if she did not check his room personally, then he would not be able to help anymore. Shu Ting again puts her hand on her heart and says that if the lady wants to carry out an inspection, then his entire room is completely at her disposal because he is not afraid of anything. Having said that she has no reason not to check this room, she opens the door and goes in to begin her check. And of course, she immediately turned her attention to the closet standing against the wall with the doors slightly open. Looking at the gap between the doors without hesitation, she sharply opened it. Immediately, a whole bunch of women's underwear spilled out. The surprise of the guys standing on the threshold knew no bounds. As one, they all opened their mouths. And Shu Ting was dumbfounded by the surprise of what was happening and could not utter a single word. At the very top of the pile lay the panties with the bear image that had been stolen from Qingyan. While everyone was in shock, Wu Shuang called Shu Ting an animal, turned around and left the room with a grin on his face, leaving the boy alone with his problems. Yun Qingyan, getting seriously angry and loudly shouting Shu Ting's name, was ready to tear him apart. Exhausted, Tin tried to say something in his own defense, but did not have time. But after the loud boom, there was a loud scream that was heard throughout the entire area. The news that the Shu family heir was stealing underwear quickly spread throughout the country in just a few days, and Dean Jin was incredibly shocked by it. Shu Ting's reputation came to an end. All the girls insulted him when they saw him, looking at him with contempt. The dean, worried about him, tried to help somehow, but the guy told him to be quiet and not appear anywhere. In an attempt to clear his reputation, Dean Jin said that an investigation had been carried out, during which it was found that Shu Ting was busy practicing with other students at the time of the incident, so he had a strong alibi. His fans fully supported the dean's speech, agreeing that the young master was not capable of such an act. Feeling incredibly angry, he promised himself that sooner or later he would take revenge on Wu Shuang. Our hero, who watched the dean's speech, noticed that having a high status is very convenient, because you can always get away with it. In his opinion, if you do not have enough power or influence, then your life will be little different from the life of a mangy dog. The whole world is divided into a clear hierarchy, a thing or a person, Everything in it is part of it. The stronger you are, the higher you are on the hierarchy list, and all authority is built around your strength. Power is divided into clear boundaries at different levels. Different levels equal different privileges, and if you are weak, you will have nothing. And just the same, the Qing family to which our hero belongs is almost at the very bottom of the clerical ladder. After all the events that happened, let's fast forward a little later in the timeline and see that Wu Shuang has already broken through to the 9th level of power. Realizing how much his strength has increased, he decides that he is ready to use techniques from his past life. There are dozens of different techniques in his mind, and at this stage he only has to choose one. Looking through dozens of different techniques, he tried to find the perfect one. He went through book after book, but everything was not what he needed. And his gaze settled on the technique of True Inferno because in his past life he practiced it a lot. Deciding to start with what was most familiar to him, he began to comprehend this technique. A bright aura began to leak from his body and he entered a state of comprehension. The aura enveloped him like fire, and the closer he was to understanding the technique, the stronger it became. Having comprehended the first level, he immediately figured that when he reached the 2nd level, he would be able to deal with any master of combat arts no higher than the 2nd level of true power. His monologue was interrupted by a sudden knock on the door, which did not subside. A guy named Fang Xiao, Ping Yin's cousin, came running to him. He started shouting in panic that they had captured Brother Yin, and according to him, Xian Zhang and the others were to blame for this. Angry, Wu Shuang decided that this time Zhang would not get off lightly. Remembering how Zhang beat him, he decided that today he would settle all scores with him. Angry, Wu Shuang learned where Pin Yin was and went to help him. At this time, the poor guy was hung upside down, and there was a whole crowd of nasty boys around him. Someone in the crowd was wondering whether Wu Shuang would come, and someone was denying it, because after the last beating, he would not have the courage to come. Zhang, grabbing Pin Yin by the hair, sarcastically asked him not to be offended and to blame his friend Qing Wu Shuang for everything, because he was only worried about his own skin. Raising his fist at the poor guy, he was about to strike, but a loud scream stopped him. Our hero walked through the crowd. He was filled with anger at these rich sons. In the crowd, various insults were heard in his direction, and some even suggested that he was practicing the secret art of being beaten. There were also those who began to bet whether Wu Shuang would die today or remain on the brink. Zhang and Shu Ting looked in his direction. They already had a plan for further action. They were surprised not just by his presence, but also by the look in which there was no fear. They were full of self-confidence. Standing in front of them, our hero demanded to release the innocent man because they only need him. Sui Ting, with a deft movement of his hand, cut the rope on which Ping Yin was suspended. Having lowered the guy to the ground, Wu Shuang ordered them to leave, and then he was going to figure it out himself. But Pin Yin completely refused to leave. He wanted to prove that he was worth something and was not afraid of them. Xian Zhang began to mention how he beat the main character to a pulp, and simultaneously asked whether he would like to learn such a lesson again. Wu Shuang asked if he was sure of his words, and whether he really intended to settle old scores. The crowd enthusiastically began shouting in support of Xian Zhang to beat our hero to death. Xian Zhang has been waiting for months for the moment to avenge Shu Ting, and here it is, this long-awaited chance to try out new techniques on a live pair. Folding his hands in front of his comrade Shu Ting, he respectfully called him master and asked him to play the role of judge. He, in turn, agreed to be him, because the battle is based on old grievances. Wu Shuang said with a grin that Shu Ting must have fun acting as a judge for his servant. Shu was already mentally imagining how our hero would die, and he was 100% sure of it. On the territory of the academy, rumors had already begun to spread that a duel had taken place in the bamboo forest. Duel between Wu Shuang and Xian Zhang. Most were surprised because just recently he had been beaten half to death. While everyone headed towards the place of the duel, one strange guy remained on the balcony, who apparently was not particularly interested in this event. While everyone was heading into the forest, Shu Ting announced the start of the battle by raising his hand. A lively crowd of young people shouted for Xian Zhang to beat Wu Shuang to death. Pin Yin and her cousin also stayed to watch because they were worried about their comrade who came to help them. Standing opposite our hero, Xian Zhang said that this time he would not be able to get off easily, and today would be the day of his death. Smirking, Wu Shuang suggested that he try to carry out his plan. With a sharp jerk, Xian Zhang began to approach his opponent, wanting to strike. Since our hero didn't move, Zhang had a feeling of dominance and easy victory. But Wu Shuang easily dodged the oncoming blow at the last moment with incredible speed. Not understanding what happened and how such a loser could dodge, he threw everything away to luck. A whole barrage of incessant blows fell on our hero, but he dodged everyone as if for him it was nothing more than a child's game. Xian Zhang, starting to lose his breath, didn't understand what was happening. Where did the mediocre get such speed? Wu Shuang, never tired, continued to dodge all the flying attacks, and the smile never left his face. Jumping back, Xianzhang called our hero a coward capable only of dodging and nothing more. The crowd supporting him, having agreed, began to shout that Wu Shuang was a pathetic coward, and that he had no sense in evading, and that he was only disgracing himself. With indifference, our hero said that he could not help himself because his opponent was incredibly slow, and even a child could dodge his attacks. Angry, Xianzhang began to emit an aura. He said that he was now using his new technique and Wu Shuang would die instantly. The crowd, surprised, began to say that he was almost at the level of Mr. Shu Ting, and from their conversations, one could find out that Zhang was at the 3rd level of power. Taking a stance, all the aura began to accumulate in Xianzhang's fist. Loudly shouting the name of his technique, Fist of the Crushing Wind, he lunged forward and delivered a swift blow to our hero's torso. A bright explosion occurred around Wu Shuang and a cloud of dust rose up. Xianzhang, with a smile on his face, was completely sure that our hero's speed was not enough to dodge, and now, if he is not dead, then at least he has become crippled. The crowd perked up and everyone was surprised by such a powerful blow. Ping Yin and his cousin were very worried about what happened to their friend. Shu Ting, smiling, mentally noted the death of his enemy. Slowly, the dust and smoke from the impact began to dissipate. Suddenly, Xianzhang's face was covered not just with surprise, but more with some kind of fear of the unexpected. Evil, red eyes looked at him through the fog. A chill ran through his body. Fear enveloped him and he could not move. A safe and sound Wu Shuang stood in front of him, and it was his furious eyes that he saw in the smoke. Shu Ting was also surprised, who also could not find a single word, because he was dumbfounded from surprise. As soon as the smoke cleared, the entire crowd of observers were surprised that Wu Shuang not only did not suffer, but did not even budge. While giving his opponent a terrifying look in his head, he mentions that he is already at the 1st level of true power. Only when he managed to reach it remains a mystery. Emitting a huge amount of aura, our hero said that Xianzhang will be the only one who will lose his life in this duel. Our hero's opponent was filled with a sense of fear, his eyes filled with horror and his mouth unable to say anything. The next moment, Wu Shuang's swift fist was in Xianzhang's face. The blow was so strong that the guy flew into a stone standing behind, crushing it, and after his rapid flight, traces of the aura from the protagonist's fist remained. Just one blow and the annoying Xianzhang lies lifeless in a pile of stones. The crowd watching the fight simply had no words. They silently looked at it with their eyes wide. Having recovered a little from the shock of shock, the boys began to discuss in surprise that their invincible Xianzhang died from just one single blow. They could not understand how a guy from an ordinary family could defeat the elite. Our hero stands proudly with a smile, completely covered with the remainder of the aura, observing the surrounding situation. While Wu Shuang's friends ran up to him, filled with joy for his victory, Shu Ting, standing on the side, could not understand how an ordinary villager could become stronger so quickly. Pin Yin and his cousin with sparkling eyes began to wonder what kind of technique their sworn brother was using, and he in turn promised that he would somehow teach them, but now they need to leave. Not forgetting about Shu Ting standing aside, our hero looked at him mockingly and thanked him for being their judge. The incredibly angry guy didn't know what to do. The henchman standing behind him also did not know how to support him. Gathering his thoughts and taking a deep breath, he ordered the guys to go and report to the government that Qing Wu Shuang killed the Zhang family's elephant in one-on-one combat. The next shot shows 2 people running out of the gate of the Qing family, and a bunch of gifts are flying at their backs. It was Liang Shan who drove out the representatives of the Niu family who owned the herbal store. These arrogant bastards dared to propose based on their relationship with the Shu family, but he does not intend to give his daughter to such scum. Our hero's sister, without fear of anything, says that she has nothing to fear as long as he and Wu Shuang are nearby. Feeling a little sad, the father began to wonder how his son was doing at the academy, because he had not heard news from him for a long time. Let's return to our hero. He and his comrades, being in their room, discussed what to do next, whether they should run or stay. Pinyin insisted on staying, because a large number of people were watching the battle, and no one could blame them. Wu Shuang claimed that everything would work out, but it was still better for them to stay away from him, and this way no one could accuse them of anything. But the guys refused, because all this happened because Pinyin was captured and he came to his aid, so they are ready to be with him until the very end. With a suspicious smile, Wu Shuang agreed that they should stay, because Jin Bui was supposed to appear any minute. As the main character said, the dean arrived almost immediately, accompanied by Shu Ting and other guys. He immediately began accusing him of murder, saying that all the evidence was against him. Fully confident, Wu Shuang left the room saying that not everyone around him was blind and that it was an absolutely fair fight and Lord Shu acted as a judge. Shu Ting, trying to make our hero guilty, tells the dean that all his words are lies, and he killed Xianzhang out of his hatred of him. Fully confident that no one would dare go against his family, he glanced around at the crowd standing behind him. all the witnesses as one began to pretend to be ignorant fools. Jin Bui, with a wide smile filled with contempt, began to say that no one could justify Wu Shuang. His friends came out from behind our hero and were going to testify that their friend was innocent of anything, but the dean did not want to listen, citing the fact that they could protect him since they were from the same city. Then the head of the Zhao family, Mao Zhang, and his eldest son Yao Zhang came. Appearing with an embittered face, he began to find out who the killer of his son was, and the elder wanted to challenge him to a fight. Approaching the dean, he asked why he didn't just arrest the culprit, to which Jin said that everything would be done now. Ordering his students to seize Wu Shuang, he said that he had no evidence that could prove his innocence. Having spread his arms, the main character began to shout that they were all just cowards who would never in their lives dare to tell the truth in the presence of great families, that they would be simple dogs for the rest of their lives. Jin Buyi told Wu Shuang to stop talking nonsense and ordered the others to quickly capture the culprit. But then the same guy who had been left watching from the balcony entered the courtyard. He told everyone to stop. Everyone knew him very well. He was Daxi Yan from the great Daxi family, a sophisticated young man with white skin and long white hair. Looking at Shu Ting with his calm blue eyes, which showed disgust, he condemned the way he performed the duties of a judge. Everyone was very surprised by the appearance of a person from such an influential family, and many also noticed that he was clearly not happy with Shu Ting. Jin Bui immediately began to suck up, saying that he was ready to listen to everything said by the respected gentleman, and also mentioned that he was embarrassed when other countries had a reason to laugh at their old one. Daxi Yang agreed to act as a witness. From his words, he made it clear that the duel between Qing Wushuang and Xianzhang was absolutely fair, and Shu Ting indeed acted as a judge in it. Unexpecting that such an influential person would act as a witness for such trash as our hero, Head Zhao asked that justice would overtake him. Turning towards them, Daxi Yan said that all members of the Daxi family always keep their word. Our hero's friends immediately attacked the dean with the claim that since there is evidence, now something needs to be done with those who falsified the evidence. The confused Jin Bui began to admire that all the cases required a thorough investigation, and that Wu Shuang, according to his words, was constantly adding problems to the academy. Pointing his finger at him, he continued to shout that this time he had completely violated the harmony of the academy. With indifference, Wu Shuang said that he was sure that the dean would simply throw him out of the academy, while simultaneously emitting a terrifying aura. Getting even more angry, Dean Jin asked if our hero doubted his abilities. A sharp response from an indifferently smiling Wu Shuang. He asked Jin Bui if he was sure that our hero wanted to stay in the academy. He directly told the unbearable old man that he stayed there for a couple of months only to wait for the moment to kill the idiot Xianzhang. The old man could not find words. He stood and stuttered, not knowing what to answer. Without waiting for an answer, our hero walked past the dean and said that he was not going to stay at this academy a minute longer. His friends followed him. He decided to shout to the departing hero in the back that he would not allow him to take the martial arts exam in 3 years. Wu Xuan was not taken aback and said that Jin Bui's greed has no limit. From the words of our hero, we understand that the sacred land of Zhengwu will send its people to take the exam, while the dean is simply a servant who has no right to influence the exam. Immediately behind the dean, the head of Zhao decided to speak with a slander that he would not be able to leave after the murder of his son. Looking at the elder, the main character asked if he was really going to kill him publicly. In thought, he assessed his approximate level of strength and came to the conclusion that he could not defeat him yet. The third was Shu Ting, who shouted to Wu Shuang that he would not last long with his pride. Having stopped, he ordered everyone to listen. According to him, all the blame lies with them because of their own negligence towards his family. Looking towards his ill-wishers with a furious look, he said that unlike the mountains that can never meet, he will wait for their meeting in 3 years, and then they will all regret that they got involved with our hero. Head Zhao could barely contain his anger, and Jin Bui told him to be careful because now the Qing family was under the protection of Daxi. He is also sure that in 3 years their little family will be destroyed. I honestly don't know where he got this confidence from, but oh well. The next day they showed us Daxi Yan. Next to him stood the elder of his family, Daxi Heng, and it was Heng who became interested in Wu Shuang, saying that he was not as simple as he might seem. The head of Daxi had a dialogue with his son about how Qing Wu Shuang, although he was in the poor class, made it even more interesting to watch. Having waited for a long time for the moment to strike at the end, now the rest of the families, if they try to rob his family, at most they will only find problems for their own. Daxi Yan asked his father why the situation was changing so much because of a simple dispute between students, to which he received the answer that if he had not acted as a witness, then everything could have been simpler. But because of his testimony, the the situation became a little different. The father continued talking and further told his son that now the Shu family will be wary because of the possibility of the Qing family being connected with them. The guy offered to simply prove that they do not have any relationship and are not connected in any way. But he stopped Yang because from his point of view, they should not be nice to aristocrats like the Jiang family. Moreover, he considers Wu Shuang to be quite a brave young man. Next, the guy decided to ask his father for news about his older brother, to which his father said that he was already big and would soon come to his senses. Who is this brother and what happened to him, we don't know yet. Hearing this answer, he seemed satisfied with it. Next, we are transported to our hero. At this time, he and his friends are heading home in a carriage drawn by one horse. His friends panic that an ambush may await them along the way. Calmly, he assures them that nothing like that will happen, and they decide to clarify exactly why he thinks so. Looking at them, he said all the words in which he mentioned the esteemed Daxi family. While the news of Wu Shuang defeating a member of a famous family and leaving the academy spreads like fire, his father and sister decide to go out to meet him. Walking out of the family gate, you can see joyful smiles on their faces. The father proudly says that his son was able to win glory for the family with his victory. Their conversation was interrupted by two unknown people. One of them said that he was glad to see Mrs. Xu Er come out to meet him. It was the herbal seller Niu Dai with his eldest son Niu Fen. Well, they are handsome, of course. Dai suggested that his son go and talk to Mrs. Xu Er. Not having time to approach the girl, Fenya's father stood in her way and asked what questions he had for them. Dai said that they had come to propose marriage to them and discuss some possibilities of cooperation. Frowning his eyebrows, Lian Shan asked if these two really came to cooperate. Just as the father was about to answer something, he was suddenly interrupted by a voice repeating his words, and he and his daughter turned around in surprise. It was Wu Shuang, who had just returned home. Calling out to his father and sister, he said that he was glad to see them, to which they reciprocated, because they also missed him. Dai congratulated the returning young master on his victory over a member of a famous family, but in his mind, he was sure that it would not have been possible without someone's help. Turning his attention to the vile old man, Wu Shuang warned him that he was late, and the Shu family had already retracted their words about the destruction of his family. Do not believe the words of our hero. He began to talk about his close relationship with Mr. Shu, and that as soon as the head of Qing gave up his place, and also accepted the marriage proposal, he would be ready to provide them with security. Confident in his words, Wu Shuang, looking at Dai with a cold gaze, said that he should go back to where he came from, and they would wait until Shu did something against them. The herbalist, dissatisfied that an ordinary child interacted with him like that, asked if the elder agreed that the family was actually ruled by a brat. Lian Shan, saying that his son's words were also his words, asked Naya to leave. Fen, baring his rabbit fangs, began to shout indignantly that if Wu Shuang did not allow him to marry his sister, then when she crawled to him with pleas for marriage, he would not accept them. When leaving, our hero looked at the younger Nia, calling him a baby, and invited him to marry their cows. After his words, he loudly and demonstratively slammed the door in front of Naya. The offended handsome men angrily said that the Qing family cannot distinguish between good and bad, and will soon simply rot. As soon as Niyu's family left them, our hero, surrounded by his family, sat down at a table in the courtyard. Wu Shuang began the conversation by mentioning his thoughts. He thought that his father would be ashamed of him because he left the academy. But Lian Shan never even thought about such a thing, because defeating a member of a famous family is already worthy of respect. The main character says that Xianzhang's death was just the beginning, because it will only get worse. Wu Shuang's father tensedly said that those rich people would not be able to leave such an incident aside and coughed. As soon as the cough intensified, Lian Shan began to spit blood. The children, frightened, jumped up to him. But the main character immediately noticed what happened to their father. He saw a large amount of tangled energy inside his father's body, and immediately knew that it was due to overuse of training. Looking at him carefully, in his head he expressed his thoughts that since his father's training methods are not the best, then if he rushes into training, he will quickly fall asleep due to internal energy, just like he did in his previous life. Trying to calm the children down, he said that a bug had gotten into his mouth. But his daughter, not believing such a stupid excuse, suggested calling a doctor. Having stopped his sister, our hero, with a face full of confidence, said that he knew a way to help his father. Lian Shan and Xu Er were both a little shocked by this statement and asked if it was a joke. In the very next frame, we see how Wu Shuang poked a bunch of needles into his father. The sister standing next to her asked how her father was feeling. He said that his meridians had become softer, and he also felt a lot better. The main character explained to his father that he had gone too far with training, and his internal ki energy did not have time to clear itself in time. It was as a result of such an error that his meridians were upset, and with the help of silver needles, our hero was able to remove unstable energy from the body. Having praised his son, the father immediately asked where he learned such techniques, to which he received the answer that during the many years he spent at the academy, he read quite a lot of the books there. After his explanation, our hero mentally noted that silver needles can only relieve symptoms, but not cure a person. The more Lian Shan trains, the worse he will become. In order for him to be completely cured, Wu Shuang decides that he must read the masterpiece of the Shaolin school, the Book of Changing Tendons, cleanse the spinal cord, and completely cut off his hair. Having copied this book in advance, he resolutely gives it to his father, saying that he took it to the library of the academy but did not understand what was written there. Incredibly surprised by what was written inside the book, O2 decided to clarify whether his son actually took such a masterpiece at the academy. Wu Shuang already had an excuse ready. He said that Jin Bui still couldn't understand, so thinking that there might be valuable information there, he quietly took it with him. Surprisingly, it worked, and my father said that it was not surprising that such an amazing book could be found in an academy that had existed for a couple of centuries. Padoya from behind asked his father what was written in this book. Reading the book, he replied that it was a collection of quite serious techniques, which their family sorely lacked. Wu Shuang quoted lines from the book about how he would have to cut off all his hair and clear his brain from his back. He asked if it was risky. The father's answer was short. According to him, all strong people, one way or another, expose themselves to risks. Lian Shan wanted to give such a great book to his son, but our hero refused, saying that he would not be able to use it now, and suggested that his father try it, because there was a chance that it would heal him. Agreeing with his son, he decided to be the first to study the instructions from the book, and later promised to teach them to the main character. After telling Xu Er to watch his backside, he wanted to concentrate on training, and mentioned that with the help of this book, there is a chance to reach the second level of true strength before evaluating families. Smiling, Wu Shui suggested in his thoughts that with the collection of techniques described in the book for 3 years, his father had every chance of breaking through even the true power of the 4th level. While our hero was talking with his family, the head of the Zhang family stood in front of the coffin of his son, and behind him stood the same Mr. Shu. The incredibly embittered head Zhang, cursing Wu Shuang, wishes that his entire family would know such grief. Mr. Shu, saying that he understood his feelings, warned that revenge would have to be postponed sooner. Zhang, looking angrily at Shu, understood that due to the fact that his son was drawn into the Shu family's attempts to seize the Qing's place, he immediately believed that the Qing were to blame for everything. Clenching his fist, he said that Mr. Shu can be calm, because he understands everything. His hands were shaking from the bitterness of loss and the thirst for revenge. But realizing that it was not time yet, he said that he would allow the Qing family to live a little longer. After all the events, Wu Shuang stands proudly on the cliff of the mountain. An incredible view of the city and the surrounding mountains opens up in front of him. Closing his eyes, he raised his head and took a deep breath, preparing for something. Having set himself up, he jumped off the cliff and rushed down without fear of anything. Upon landing, he did not stop smiling, and from his words we learned that several days had already passed since his arrival home, and the place where he practices is called Mount Sang, and the practice there is much better. He was distracted from his thoughts by voices calling him. These were friends who had come to see our hero. Approaching them, Wu Shuang said that the two of them had been taught a good lesson like this at home, but they just grinned at him in response, not paying attention to the fact that they both had bruises and bandages on their faces. They told how they were scolded at home for communicating with our hero, and for being expelled from the academy without permission. But in general, the guys came on another matter. It turns out that in the morning they heard from his sister that he was going to climb to the top of Mount Sang. Confirming the words of his friends, Wu Shuang asked if they would like to go with him. They replied that now all they could do was study some basic family techniques, and they had no books on martial arts at all, and they weren't even sure that they would be able to pass the exams. After their stories, they asked how Wu Shuang trains, because he was able to defeat Xianzhang in just a couple of months, and they also enthusiastically asked if he could help them become stronger. Our hero was surprised that children born in such poor families had such a strong spirit. He wondered how the past Wu Shuang was able to make such good friends. With a serious look, the main character invited his friends to select a set of cultivation techniques and assured them that if they followed them, they would pass the exam without any problems. The inspired boys agreed to follow all the instructions of their friend, and for the next 3 months, Wu Shuang trained with them. Every day in the middle of the forest, they did hundreds of push-ups in the fresh air in one set. Next came a rack with weights for endurance training. Despite all the hardships of the training, they did not give up and continued to train hard. This was followed by meditation requiring high concentration in order to raise the level of internal qi energy. The meditation was followed by a run, The guys had to jump over obstacles in an attempt to catch up with Wu Shuang. While they were running downhill, Pinyin decided to mention that today, they were almost able to catch up with our hero. While Wu Shuang stood calmly and looked into the distance, one of the duo said breathlessly that finally they had not lost him while they were running after him. Letting out heavy sighs, Pinyin hopefully asked if they were able to at least get one step closer to his level. Instead of answering, he simply showed that he had 2 more weights on his legs. Both guys were shocked by what they saw and couldn't understand how he could train with such things all this time. Smiling, Wu Shuang said that from tomorrow they will have to do everything the same as he did. Their surprise probably knew no bounds. To calm them down, he told them that he was going to teach them several aggressive martial arts techniques, and the guys' attention was diverted by this. Having said that their personalities are different, their techniques must also be different. The first was Hu Pinyin. He received the 18 vials technique to study, a very powerful and fierce technique for real men. Next was Fang Xiaozhong. He will have to learn the capture the flexible serpent technique, which offers tricks in a fight against traditions. Having handed them out, the technician Wu Shuang told him to listen carefully and repeat exactly after him. Closing his eyes, he voiced a short mantra, which the guys needed to repeat. After repeating it, a large amount of aura began to swirl around their bodies. Xiaozhong did not expect that from simply reading the mantra he could feel such a powerful force. Of course, the boy was very surprised by this. Pinyin, of course, was no less surprised than his comrade. Realizing that such power cannot be compared with the family techniques, he decided to clarify whether our hero was really giving them all this. Smiling widely, Wu Shuang said that he was giving it to them. They were friends. After that, they all began to train intensively together. Their strength grew day by day, and now we see the Pranish being embittered by the fact that they were sending Wu Shuang, Pinyin's father, to Xinghe. With a club in his hand, he walks and wonders how he cannot kill the 2 little brats, who, despite all the comments, still ran away. But his gaze was filled with surprise when he saw those 2 sparring in the backyard. Their blows were very strong for their age, and their techniques reminded my father of a fight between an aggressive bear and a flexible snake, anticipating each attack. He simply could not understand where the once weak brats got such strength from. Loudly calling them by name, he asked who taught them this. The guys, frightened by the unexpected appearance of their father, said that it was all the merit of Wu Shuang. Enraged, she began to scold Pinyin and Xiaozhong again, saying that the Qing family had insulted the rich families, and nothing good would happen to them now. He orders them to stay as far away from our hero as possible. Xiaozhong decided to come forward, saying that they had learned a lot from Wu Shuang, but his uncle confidently said that he could not be better than a normal teacher. The old man decided to test the boys, ordering them to simultaneously attack with all their strength, and also assured that he would not even need to use internal strength. Pinyin, saying that he didn't want to hurt his father, asked if he was sure, but nothing could convince him, and he insisted that they attacked him with all their might. Standing in front of him, both guys took fighting stances and began to emit a strong aura in preparation for the strike. Confident in his own strength, he thought that he wouldn't even have to try, and also that once they felt the power of a strong man, they would stop running to their grief-stricken friend. Pinyin, realizing that his father is a master of true power, decides to give it his all. Having released all their strength, the boys dealt a heavy blow to the old man's stomach, so much so that his vision grew dim. For a moment he was shocked, perhaps even lost consciousness. Pinyin, afraid for his father, asked in a panic if he was okay. The old man, who reacted sharply, raised his hand and said that attacks of such a low level could not affect him in any way. But instead of scolding them, he put his hands on their shoulders and said that they should continue training with Wu Shuang. Turning around with a serious look, the father began to leave, saying that he would go to his room to rest. Xiaozhong was surprised by the strength of a person at the level of true might, but as soon as he turned the corner of the building, all his seriousness evaporated and he fell to his knees. Blood burst out of his mouth like a fountain, which he tried so hard to hold back in front of the guys, so as not to show his weakness. Sweating heavily and catching his breath, he began to realize that even if they looked weak on the outside, in reality they could reach incredible heights. Imagining the image of Wu Shuang, he decided that it seemed that his victory in that duel was deserved by his strength, and not by some kind of deception. After thinking a little, he finally agreed not to bother Pinyin and Xiaozhong anymore, because with the help of Wu Shuang, they could bring their families to unprecedented heights. Continuing their training, the boys became stronger under the clear guidance of our hero. Almost every day they sparred to test their strength. Xiaozhong told Pinyin that with each passing day he felt stronger and stronger. Pinyin, in turn, praised the techniques received from brother Wu Shuang, saying that they were simply incredible. He also said that it would be great if they managed to get to the 5th level of martial arts before the exam, because having achieved it further, they would be able to move towards true power, which would later help him stop being afraid of his father's blows. Smiling, our hero watched them sprout, and in his thoughts he mentioned that using force to build family relationships is quite interesting. But when Wu Shuang changes their training set from basic techniques to something more complex, they will be able to reach incredible heights. Rising from his seat, he warned his friends that he was going to go climb higher and set off. Having reached a new place, he chose a convenient stone in the open area as a stop. Sitting more comfortably, he began to cultivate. An aura covered his body, and a small fireball began to form between his hands. Putting his hand in front of him, the previously accumulated fire went to the side and its power was incredible. Wu Shuang began a monologue that after a year he was able to upgrade his fire technique to the 6th level, which is approximately 10% of what it was in his previous life. His intention to restore at least 80 Prohuentoa before assessing the families has not yet disappeared. Looking forward confidently, our hero was going to lead the Qing family to the top, everything he has in this life and he simply must protect. Over the next 2 years, Hu Pingyin and Feng Xiaozhong mastered their martial arts skillfully. Qing Lichen Shan was able to reach the 3rd level of true power with the help of the Book of Tendon Change, which is very commendable. And our hero, who was not only able to master the true Inferno technique, but was also able to practice new ones, such as the Frozen Finger and Strikes of 9 Suns. After 2 years that flew by in an instant, the martial arts exam officially began. Wu Shuang, kneeling with incense in his hands, paid tribute to his ancestors. Over these 2 years, the main character has changed quite a lot. He has become taller and much more attractive. This is what it means to grow up. The day of registration arrived, and a lot of people wanted to take part gathered in front of the entrance arch. Our hero was also there with his father and sister. Xu Er looked around and said that the street was very busy. Lian Shan responded to her words that, after all, such a major event does not happen often. In his thoughts, Wu Shuang noticed that knowing Lian Shan's character, he would not have fought for the highest place, but would have stayed with what he had. Having finished his thought, he asked his father to give him the registration form to fill out. Handing him the form, his father said that sooner or later, he would still come face to face with this, and added that he and his sister would be waiting for him outside. Looking at the table, he noticed that only the entrance fee eliminated many people, because while for the rich the price was 1 tael of gold, the peasants had to pay 50 taels in the same gold. Looking at the form, he thought that since the ancestors were in the rich class, which is the highest among the classes of Shu, his father would be glad if he came out to restore it. To obtain the status of a rich family, you must have at least 1 warrior of the 4th level of true power. Looking around, Wu Shuang is confident that with his strength, he will defeat anyone whose level does not exceed the 8th level of true power. It turns out that our hero was able to rise to the 8th level of true power in 2 years. Having brought the form to the receptionist, he, without even looking at him, told him to put it down, and throwing him a badge, said that he could only enter with his help. But as soon as the head of the Yun family approached him with his daughter, he jumped up from his chair and joyfully greeted him. The main character was incredibly angry at this attitude, due to a simple difference in family status. Returning to the family, Wu Shuang saw a crowd of heads of other large families standing around his father and sister. In front of them stood Head Jiang and Shu. Head Jiang, turning to the father of our hero, demands that someone like him, the patriarch of a poor family, show courtesy to the honorable gentleman, and also understand that he has no manners. They were already surrounded by a crowd of onlookers, beginning to convene even more people under the pretext that the rich were again mocking the poor. Lian Shan, realizing that his son is about to begin his martial arts test, feels that it would be awkward to argue with them in public. Head Zheng, despite the fact that Head Qing is doing nothing, begins to laugh contemptuously in his face. And then Wu Shuang passes between them, who, without the slightest manners, greets everyone as if they were old friends. Looking at Zhang, he says that he looks bad, and asks if he has ever had nightmares. Mr. Shu butts into the conversation, calling our hero an arrogant child. He tells him that one of the most important things in being a person is to know when to retreat and when to advance. Looking at him, Wu Shuang says that he understands what the master is talking about, and he promises to give up the current place of his family. Calling our hero's aspiration a wise choice, he told Lian Shan that his son was much smarter than him. As he was about to leave, Wu Shuang folded his hands and said that this was a promise and they would meet later. Head Zhang approached Shu and asked whether he believed the words spoken by Qing Wu Shuang. Shu replied that it doesn't matter whether he believes it or not, but he is sure that the Qing family will eventually have to pick up someone's piece of meat thrown on the floor. Shu also mentioned that he had been investigating, and in the past 3 years, the Qing family had no contact with the Daxi family. Thinking it's already clear what this means, coming out of the arch where the registration was held, Xu Er immediately told Wu Shuang that even the status of a poor family was achieved by their father with great difficulty, asking if he really wants to give up their place, and if so, what will he say to his ancestors in this case. Lian Shan knows that his son would never give up their place. Then why did he say this no matter how hard he tries? He cannot understand him. Our hero told the family not to worry. In his head, he mentioned that since the Xu family wants their place, he will gladly give them the poor class, because his plans are to move to the rich class, and the hour when the Qing family will rise is closer than ever. Already at night, the father asked Wu Shuang to rest well and be ready for tomorrow's exam. Lying down on the bed, our hero became lost in his thoughts and began to reason that if it weren't for the rules, then the rich would have already passed the exam simply by paying. But he quickly got tired of it. Just as he was about to fall asleep, Wu Shuang saw a strange glow outside his window, which greatly alarmed him. The next second, a killer broke through the window into the protagonist's room and was about to finish off our hero with one blow. Raising his gaze to the killer, in front of his face was a blow filled with strong qi energy. Reacting quickly, he intercepted the enemy's hand, extended it further, and gathering strength in his hand, was about to strike. From the force of the hand flying at the killer, the mask on his face flew off, and he himself was in indescribable shock from what was happening. With a sharp movement of his hand, Wu Shuang grabbed the unsuccessful killer by the throat. The killer could not move. He did not understand how an ordinary boy could have the power to stop a person with true power. Releasing his furious power, his eyes were filled with powerful qi so much that they began to shine. The evil Wu Shuang rudely and briefly asked who sent him. Frightened, the killer felt an incredibly oppressive aura on himself. He was sure that he would be killed if he said even something unnecessary. Without hearing an answer, Wu Shuang pulled him towards him, looking at him with his chilling eyes, in which one could see an incredible thirst for murder. Frightened and unable to withstand the pressure from the main character, he spoke. In a hoarse voice, he said the name of Maoyu Jiang, who is the head of the Jiang family, and also the fact that after the murders of Wu Shuang, he also ordered him to kidnap his sister in order to have fun later with her. With a slight movement of his hand, our hero took the life of the killer without the slightest drop of pity. Looking at the corpse of the murderer lying on the floor, he repeated the name of the head of the Jiang family several times and added that he did not deliberately provoke him. But since he could not sit quietly, he would no longer see a peaceful life. Having said that since Mr. Jiang likes to play so much, he agrees to join him, and they will play until Jiang begins to beg our hero to stop. While he uttered such cold words filled with malice, his lust for killing reached the highest level in his entire time in this world. Showing a busy street, we are told that the most successful participant is at the 9th level of martial arts. On average, students are at the 4th or 5th level. A bunch of rich children can reach the 6th or 7th level. Many are unsure, but at this time it is believed that only Daxi Yan has reached the 9th level of martial arts. And then our hero comes on stage with his family and notices the liveliness of the event. We are shown Qing Yan and his father, standing and smiling because they are confident in their strength. Then Shu Ting and his henchmen, when they saw Ting, all the girls looked at him in admiration. He is fully confident that he will be able to pass the exam this year. Suddenly, his attention was attracted by the fact that all the 2-room apartments had turned away somewhere. In fact, they noticed Daxi Yan passing by and turned their attention to him. Looking at him angrily, Shu Ting thought that Daxi would be his only rival. Further on, it shows the grown-up Pinyin and Xiao Zhong, who came to Wu Shuang. Having met, our hero immediately noticed that his friends looked quite confident, but they agreed with him and said that they would be ashamed if they were not so confident after such training. Then the freak Niyu with his second son Niyu Do approached the company of our hero and said that Lian Shan's son had come just to watch the performance. Ping Yin stepped forward and threatened Do for insulting his friend. Niu Du said that the two of them do nothing but follow Wu Shuang and offered to join him. Only Pin Yin was about to start an argument as our hero stopped the rocks. That Du was completely right and they were still scum. Passing by, he touched his shoulder, advising him to take care of himself during the exam. With a gesture towards Wu Shuang's shoulder, he poured his aura into Niu Du's body, and for what purpose we will find out later. While our hero was walking on his way, the herbalist Niu noticed Daxi Yan and called out to him. He turned to him, saying that he supported poor families, and was just about to say something. Yang interrupted him and threw a cold look in his direction, telling him to fuck off. He tried to appeal to several other rich people, all of whom rejected him, at which our hero's friends laughed a lot. Lian Shan asked Wu Shuang not to let him down. He said that everything would be fine. And taking their friends, they went to show everything they were capable of. The next shot showed us a beautiful girl with a refined figure. This is the presenter, and her name is Ying Xuan. She announced short rules. The first test would be a 100-mile run around the Luojiang area, and their assessment would depend on the time of arrival. She also warned that they would be watched all the way, so they wouldn't cheat. Telling them to get ready, she struck a seductive pose. And with a loud cry, she announced the beginning. All participants rushed forward at full speed. Having run through the exit beyond the wall of the district, everyone tried to get ahead. Xu Ting, who was running in front of Wu Shuang, looked at him with contempt. Turning around, he said that such overgrown ones from poor families should swallow dust behind. Wu Shuang smiled and decided to show him which of them was better. And unexpectedly, Xu Ting took the lead with just one deft movement. Turning to look at his opponent, our hero sarcastically wished him bon appetit. And accelerating even more, he overtook everyone, including Qinyan and Yang, who were in front. He became the first on the list. He ran at such a speed that every second he moved further and further from his rivals. Xu Ting, very angry, did not understand how this was even possible. Daxi Yan calmly wondered how strong Wu Shuang had become during the time they had not seen each other. Qingyan was no less surprised than the others. She couldn't believe that this was still the same Wu Shuang from before. Two people stood at the first post and discussed who would be the winner this year. Suddenly, someone ran in front of them at incredible speed, and they were quite surprised. Meanwhile, we saw why our hero touched the shoulder of Niu Du, who was now sitting under a tree. Daxi Yan ran past the same post. One of the onlookers asked if it was Daxi's son who had just run by. The second confirmed it. Afterwards, both looked at each other in surprise and wondered who was first then. At this time, Wu Shuang continued to run without slowing down. Because after 3 years of running the Sang Mountain workout, such an activity is no more difficult than going to the toilet. He rushed past every point along the way with incredible speed. And so he crosses the finish line with a smile on his face. The judge was in a stupor because he didn't even have time to finish his lunch. After giving Wu Shuang a score sheet, the judge told him to go to the next test site. Watching the main character move on, the judge, while eating noodles, suggested that no one in the Baiwei kingdom could compare with him. There were 2 people at the second exam site. A muscular man and a gray-haired old man. They were discussing that the difficulty of the exam had increased this year. They were distracted from the dialogue by someone's voice from behind, who politely asked them to pay attention to him. Wu Shuang stood behind him, raising 2 iron balls at once and asking if this was how it was done. The judges were incredibly surprised that he was able to lift 2 balls at once, and even the heaviest ones, each weighing 1,500 kilograms. Having given the form to our hero, the judge decided to ask if he was really 18. Having accepted the form, Wu Shuang replied with a smile that lying about age is the privilege of the rich, and he did not see that poor children also had such opportunities. To be continued. Thanks for watching. Subscribe. Dabo Recap with Love.